Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Eoghan McCabe. He's the founding CEO and now chairman and co-founder at Intercom. Eoghan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think people like yourself, I've been using your product for a very long time now, and it's cool to have somebody on the show like yourself, especially a co-founder and former CEO of companies that you've actually used their product and you've loved their products for a number of years. But maybe before we get into Intercom and the story of that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. So I was born in Dublin, Ireland.
Very cool.
Actually, where I am right now. I spent the last 10 years in San Francisco Bay Area, but I'm back in Dublin. And I, spent a lot of time in the city here in Dublin. Fell in love with it and also found it a little small. When I left Dublin in around 2011, Silicon Valley and San Francisco, these were just the places you went. It was a little more clear that that was your big option if you wanted to do something a little grander, and it was obvious that Dublin just couldn't compare. And so, I had a lot of fun here in Ireland, and I started a couple companies here, went to college here, but it didn't take me too long before I got dragged overseas.
Sure. What did you take in college and why?
I studied computer science. I grew up watching, there was these cool shows. One was called Beyond 2000. Another was called Tomorrow's World.
Okay.
One was a UK show. Another was Australian. I need to go and dig them out and see. I'm sure they're on YouTube. And they would talk about this bright, brilliant future, flying cars. I remember one episode where they talked about how in the future you could, get all your nutrition from these little pills or, these
Sure.
these products, all sorts of wacky, silly stuff. But it really just ignited my imagination about what was possible. Back then, I'm 36, and that was probably a solid 30 years ago. People talked about the future in these bright, brilliant ways. Now we are a little scared about what's going to come next.
Sure.
But back then it was so exciting, and I was just enthralled by it. So I wanted to be a scientist and an inventor. A lot of the people on these shows, they were scientists and engineers and whatnot. And then I fell into computers. My parents probably spent a significant amount of their savings to get us a computer. I think we got our first computer in 1992 or something. Wow. And then I got online in 1996 through AOL, and just my mind was totally blown just by the potential of the internet, and the idea that we could connect with people across the world. And it was a very expressive place. Places like GeoCities were really, really creative.
Yep, I remember those days.
Yeah, so beautiful. I actually missed them. And so I then started to think, okay, computers is my thing. And then I happened upon the notion or idea or fact that computer science was a topic or a subject or something you could study. And so I don't know, maybe it was just the combination of those two words felt like a combination of my two worlds. And from wanting to be a scientist, I always imagined it would be, in a white lab coat, to falling in love with computers and then realizing you could do both. For whatever reason, it just clicked in my head. So, I felt bad for a lot of my peers who didn't know what they wanted to do, but I grew up as a young teenager knowing computer science was for me for whatever reason. That's what I did.
Interesting. No, that's really cool. I feel like I the exact same as you did. It's kind of a teenager. I didn't really know you could make a career being like a designer on software. Yeah. And then like it doesn't really matter. Like I eventually ended up, you know, obviously doing it as a career, and you're just like, you feel bad for people that, like, some people still struggle with it, right?
For
So
sure.
it's
For sure.
cool
Now,
when you find it.
it's true. The truth is, who knows whether or not you and I had any real wisdom back then, or we just had a little obsession, or with me, maybe we're just tickled by the wordplay of their two favorite things being in the
Sure.
same phrase. You know, so we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back too
It's
much.
probably all
for
those.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. For sure, I did feel badly for people who didn't have a direction.
Sure. So how did you and your co-founders come up with Intercom, and what exactly was it when you guys originally launched? And then I want to go through kind of how it's evolved over the last decade.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, like I said, I was just pumped about the potential of the World Wide Web. And, you know, I couldn't believe it. Just some of the stuff you could do. I remember, I don't know if you recall, but MSN, which was Microsoft Messenger, they at one point had this feature where you could make free calls to the United States. And so no matter where in the world you were, including in Dublin, Ireland, you could call people for free in the United States. And I was quite young, like I doubt I was yet a teenager, and I would call these places in the United States. I would call little regional airports. I mean, you know, I was wasting people's time, but it wasn't prank calls.
Sure.
I was just calling people up and, you know, asking them what's it like in that part of the world. Because I was just enthralled by the United States also. And that was just one example of what the internet could do and how it all worked. And really, you know, the internet was invented and came to be out of the, you know, the desire to create a new form of, you know, communication or a new communication platform. And I think we kind of all forgot that in a sense. And when people started to do things online, I think that it just took a significant amount of time for us to just catch up with some of the very simple models we appreciate in the real world. So let me bring all that together. I started to frequent a coffee shop here in Dublin with some of the folks who would be my co-founders at Intercom. And it was a cool coffee shop and run by this guy called Colin, and he was the first to bring hipster coffee to Dublin. And, you know, we came for the coffee, but we got to know this cool guy called Colin, and he really cared about us, loved the whole coffee world and would educate us about it, etc. But there was little things, the smile on his face when we walked in the door, and the twinkle in his eye when he told us about some new coffee, or just the familiarity. He remembered our names, or just the simple humanity. You know, he didn't try to sell us on things when we didn't want them. We're just we're so rich, and they created relationships and loyalty and had us coming back more often and bringing friends and giving feedback and forgiving mistakes, etc. And certainly paying more. You know, and all of that magic human stuff, it just didn't exist online. You know, 2010 when I started thinking about this stuff, the internet was fully formed in a sense, and there were all manner of digital and online businesses, but the web and the internet wasn't really being used in the way it could and has become to be used as a communication platform. It was still super transactional. And so back then, the standard way of actually interacting with people, rather than any kind of personal and human facets of interaction that you see with Colin in his coffee shop, there was, you know, really formal emails. Thanks for your inquiry. You know, you are ticket number 5053. There's spammy email. There's, you know, a lot of barriers put up to consumers trying to actually contact the business. And I just fundamentally came to know that consumers actually would just prefer more than that. But I saw that actually these online businesses didn't have the tools to do that. All I had was some crappy email, some newsletter products, and some help desk things and whatnot. All of these things really designed to cut costs and, you know, work at scale. They weren't human oriented communication platforms. And so what Intercom started as, and still is today, is a simple way for online businesses to connect with their customers. We used a messenger that you could install in your website or your app to speak to your customers as a human. And you can use GIFs and emojis, and later on, it supported voice and a range of different things, and it's becoming multi-channel. And now we use bots and have all sorts of automation and whatnot. But really, it's all about allowing the humans behind these businesses connect with their customers as humans too. You talked about how interesting it was and cool it was that you and I get to talk after you using Intercom for so long.
Totally.
And the reason that I get a kick out of that when I use a product and then I finally meet the human behind it is that for some damn reason I forgot there was a human behind it.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
It's not like it's not like I didn't intellectually know. If you ask me about any brand I use, if someone says, "Oh, did a person make that?" That'd be a dumb question. But I don't think about them.
Yeah.
And so really what we try to do is like, hey, let's bring the humans back. Let's let these brilliant, creative, wonderful, beautiful humans be their true expressive selves and connect and communicate in ways that are not only useful to the consumer, but just feel good. We all want and deeply crave connection. And so if you can bring that into the mix in a business transaction, or you're just buying something online, whatever it is, feels better, it's more effective. Everybody wins. So that was the big picture and the big goal. Our mission was to make internet business personal.
Makes total sense. So how has the product stayed the same and evolved over the last decade? Because you quickly mentioned it, but you guys obviously have still do what you did at the core when you first launched, but you've added so much more on top of that now. Yeah.
So, before I speak to that, let me give a tiny bit of context to your listeners. I'll share some kind of vanity metrics and statistics. That this is not a humble brag. This is just a brag.
Sure.
Intercom started in this really silly little place. We never imagined it would be a global corporation. Really, we were just trying to invent something cool for people to use. And very sincerely, just from that energy and effort to build something cool, we created a $1 billion business, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We did change an industry. Big public companies, small smart startups, all copy and mimic, core parts of our inventions. And there's just a lesson in that, the fact that, big things really do have small and humble beginnings. But if you really put true passion and creativity and love into something, there's probably no bounds to what can happen. So now, more practically, in terms of the technology, in so many ways, so much stayed the same. One of the things we just did well over the years was that we iterated and we listened to our customers, and we ripped up old things and rebuilt and redesigned. We started with so much hubris and dogma, great confidence in ourselves and our ideas. We learned over the years to fight our dogma, to change our minds.
Interesting.
And so, we were all about bringing humans into the mix. We realized actually AI, machine learning, and automation was the future. And so we challenged ourselves to say, how can automation and AI and all of that stuff also help make internet business more personal? And so we built very personal bots that would, respect consumers' time and preferences, and actually get them what they need quicker. And so that was one of the big fundamental changes, where at the start it was for sales, marketing, support teams, the humans in those teams to, connect with the humans that were their consumers and customers. Over time, we built the automation, the bots, and fit that into our model. And that has been a total game changer and truly does represent the future. When we interact with online brands in the future, not only will we be able to do so in, personal, fun, friendly ways and talk to people when we want to, but there's lots of times we don't want to. There's lots of times we just want an answer. And in those times, we will increasingly be helped by highly effective, highly respectful, useful, if not fun bots that just get us back to doing what it is we actually want to do. So we're big proponents of that.
Now, that's interesting. I want your thoughts on a couple of things that I think are related. How have you guys managed to push yourselves out of your own comfort zone and rethink things while balancing your product roadmap with customer requested features? Because that I get that's like a really hard question to answer, and it's kind of a long question, but I think so many startups struggle with balancing all three of those things.
You know, in a sense, we didn't have it that hard at the start because we built for tons of small businesses. When you're building consumer products or small business products, and you have a very high volume of customers and really big markets, you can actually afford substantially more to let your own philosophies and values guide the way. You can bring a market with you. You know, these are all small businesses that are flexible and adaptable to change and actually want to learn from you. They want to hear from you. Hey, what's the right way, for example, to run our support organization?
Interesting.
And so, you know, if you look at some of the greatest consumer products, especially today, you know, some of the online products that are quite opinionated, obviously, like TikTok is like a really great and big example. These are highly artistic and creative endeavors.
Right.
You know, you don't actually create TikTok by going to the market and saying, hey, what features do you want? It doesn't happen.
Interesting.
The only way you make it TikTok is that you have one crazy person who has a strong idea about the thing that they want to build, and no one's going to change their damn mind. And it turns out that they're right. And so that was how we worked at the start. You know, you see people like Apple and everyone else. You know, Steve Jobs would always famously say they didn't have focus groups. They didn't do that type of research. I'm sure that's changed a little over the years, but
sure.
But that's how it works with consumer companies. Then when you go up market and you're selling to larger enterprises, there's a smaller number of them. And if you can lead the market on the small end of the scale and the consumer end of the scale, I'm afraid that when you're working with bigger folks, they're going to lead you. They're established, they're weighty, there's inertia, a certain way of working, a lot of risk, and a very small number of them. In the consumer world, there's how many billions of people in the world? Hell, if you get 1 billion paying you $1, you've just made a phenomenal business. Whereas in the enterprise world, when you're selling to larger organizations, there may only be 341 potential customers in your market. Right. And so, you know, you're going to have to really work with them. You can't actually pick and choose. You can't afford for large swaths of the world, of the market, to not like your product. And so, you know, that's why these big businesses or these businesses that sell to big companies, they have professional services, which means that they have teams inside their organizations that will customize the product, et cetera. And so I actually managed to say loads of words without really answering your question. The fine art is actually the balance between those things. It's prioritizing the customer requests and needs while also continuing to introduce your art. And it's actually quite difficult because it's two different types of individuals. You know, my own talents and my own preferences is on the more artistic and creative side. I want to be this one controlling individual that makes up his mind about here's how everything should be done. I don't do very well when working with other people's values, and that's my own character weaknesses and flaws. But there are other people who they're more service oriented. They are great listeners. They can develop empathy for different types of organizations. And so really, I think part of it is a lot of these businesses, you know, if it's like Intercom, you're making business software, as you move up market, it's important to bring in these types of people, these different types of individuals who are going to be more customer oriented, who will listen more and who actually can take feedback and whatnot. And the mix in the cultures there is just the art of great leadership. And you're going to have to figure it out on the ground. There actually is no formula or science for that.
Interesting. Actually, what you said there, I think like just when you mentioned about kind of just sticking to your vision, and I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to your customers, because I think you should, and I think you would agree with that. It's just I see so many startups though, they build a version 1, they start getting users, and then they have maybe like 1 or 2 customers that are like, if you add this feature, I'll sign up. And then you add it and they don't. And you end up like building all these features that have nothing to do with your core and your business and potentially your current customer base, but you're always trying to, sometimes you're chasing this like big whale of a type client that will never sign up, and you're always just kind of chasing your tail a little bit. And like, I'm not saying you shouldn't build that, but like I've seen so many startups just like go after this one client and forget kind of their core mission and what value they're adding their actual customers. And they end up never getting that big client or that big customer because like they're never happy. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts around that?
There's a couple of things in there, and I'll see, can I remember to cover them. The first is that, you know, there's that thing about listening to your customers. Of course, you should listen to your customers. That's kind of saying like, of course, you should smile at kids and you should be nice to puppies. Like, it's an obvious thing. Of course, you should listen to your customers, and your customers are your customers. You know what the highest and purest form of communication is? It's the exchange of currency. And if people are giving you money for their product, they are telling you that they want it. And so if you are in the consumer end of the business, if you're selling to small businesses and there's millions of people paying for it, that's all you need to do. Like, don't let anyone tell you, if you have a growing business with lots of customers and it's working, don't let anyone tell you that you need to listen to your customers more, right? You're listening to their money and they're listening to your features, and there's a beautiful dance and an interaction there. Now, the truth is that the challenge is around the edges when you know, people inside your organization are going to say, hey, our business could be substantially bigger if we did X, Y, and Z. But therein lies the art. The art part includes knowing who the hell you are. You spoke about these businesses that they launch and then they hear that some potential big customer would pay if only they included some certain feature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In life, it's so important to get close to who we are, whether it's you as an individual, whether it's you as a business offering a product or a service. You know, it's like, you know, the age-old wisdom around, you know, relationships and love and romantic and intimate partners. Until you know you and are a whole person yourself, and are really grounded on you, you're not really going to be in a fit state to partner with anyone. It's going to be really, really difficult for anyone else in the world to know who you are, for you to actually have a relationship that is balanced and stable. The exact same is the case for any kind of business. You really need to sweat the details in your values and your philosophy and your mission and your vision and what it is you're trying to do in the world. If you don't do these things, you're going to get tossed around in the waves of customer feedback and requests and big potential customers, etc. Now, the truth is that the development of the values and the mission, the vision, the philosophy, the ideas around who you are doesn't happen in isolation. It's part of a beautiful dance that happens with the market. Just like you as an individual in the world, when you're growing up, you try out some different types of things, different types of music, different types of people and friends, different ways of representing and showing up in the world. And some feels good and some works and some doesn't and some doesn't. And so when you're building a business and a product and a service, for sure, you're going to go out into the market and you're going to realize, oh, this one value or this one philosophy or this way of thinking doesn't actually make sense. Really, what you're looking for is truth. You're trying to find a set of ideas that when the rubber meets the road, they turn out to be true. You know, a lot of the stuff in the early days is a lot of assumptions and a lot of, like I said, I described our hubris and our dogma. We had these strong ideas about how the world would be, and most of them actually turned out to be right, and that's how we built the billion-dollar business. But some of them didn't. We had to rip them up. And so, you know, developing those values and sense of self as a business, yes, there's a process and there's an interaction and a dance with the market, but it's so crucial that you really really, really relatively quickly, get grounded on what those things are, or else you're going to be in big trouble, like you just described.
Sure. So you were the founding CEO and now you recently became chairman. How did you like make sure that you were giving strong leadership and being able to know that you're right and chase the ideas that you're right, but also be open to saying like, look, truthfully, this was a bad idea. We need to change this. Like, how did you balance that from being CEO all the way down? And because a lot of CEOs, sometimes it's really hard to be actually like a good leader and accept change and accept the stuff that you're right about and accept the stuff that you weren't right about.
For sure. I think the answer is actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
And the first part of the answer is going to sound, it's not very palatable. It's not radio friendly. There's you can describe this as arrogant. There's arrogance in it.
Sure.
Right? And then the second part is the opposite. So let's just put it out there and see how it feels. So the first piece is you're not really going to be successful as a leader unless you actually are right a bunch of times.
Interesting.
I mean, if you're not smart and you don't know much about the world you're playing in, it's going to be really, really difficult. Like,
sure.
I know nothing. I'm looking, there's a cute little bakery across the street from me right now. I'm looking at them.
Okay.
I know nothing about baking.
Sure.
I know nothing about baking whatsoever. If I tried to start a bakery or some sort of baking company, you and I could be pretty sure I would fail miserably. So the first part is you're only going to be successful if you kind of know what you're doing, and you have those call them God-given abilities and skills or not, to do the damn job. And I do believe that everyone in the world has a meaningful, beautiful, magical purpose and mission to be found for them that will deliver them tremendous joy and love and connection, and great purpose in their life. And I think it's really important you find that. And if you're going to be a business leader or a CEO or any of these things, you better make sure that being that thing is your mission and your purpose at that point in time. So that's the first piece. It didn't actually sound too arrogant in the end.
No, I thought it was good. I think you're right.
But really the arrogant version is like, look, you're not, you're just going to have to be right a bunch of the time. It's like you are going to need to be right a bunch of the time. You're going to need to be smart and capable. And the flip side is you need to surround yourself with brilliant people.
Sure.
You need to surround yourself with folks who complement you or are substantially better than you in other areas, or who think in different ways, or who can be more productive or effective at certain types of things. And obviously these people you need to be able to have a healthy relationship with, and you have like good mutual respect with, and everyone kind of understands and knows their place. And in a healthy version of that, you got the leader, the CEO. I'll talk about my own circumstance, who for sure in my world as I grew up, certainly this became a little less so as I got a little older and a little wiser and a little more comfortable with all the things I didn't know. But I had a lot of confidence in myself and my own ideas, and so I got to work with a bunch of brilliant, beautiful people who were cool with that. They actually trusted me on a bunch of stuff.
Awesome.
And they actually wanted to work with me because they actually did think I had the right ideas and a bunch of other things. And thankfully, I didn't, exhibit, so much arrogance that it wasn't, unpleasant for them to be around me all the time. And actually, I was able to, bring these super talented people into the fold and recognize what they all were good at and give them space and opportunities to grow and, flex their own muscles and skills and find their own place. And, it became this beautiful collaborative thing. And so, this is why the psychological and very personal internal aspect of this is so crucial. I mean, people don't generally just want to hear from leaders these days to think that they're right. And yet I'm actually promoting the idea that the most effective leaders, just think of some brilliant people that you might look up to. I mean, I look up quite a bit to Elon Musk.
Sure.
I just think he's probably right about a bunch of the stuff he works on. He just is. That's okay. But he and I and everyone else, and forgive me for putting he and I in the same sentence here, but any leader with any degree of success needs to know their limits and their boundaries, and they need to do the introspection to be able to, be one of these people that is smart and quite right a lot of the times on the topics on which they work, and know when they're not, and be able to form great, meaningful, respectful, positive, fun, rich relationships with the people around them, and for it to be just a beautiful, virtuous thing. I'm sure there's a model of a leader that is super smart and super right most of the time, and is also a tyrant.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a put up or shut up thing. And maybe some of these people are just so brilliant that people are just willing to go along with it. I personally have found a different type of a model, and I wouldn't judge anyone for whatever way that they live their lives, but there's also a model where I think you can be smart and right and bring a lot to the table as a leader or the leader, and exhibit a phenomenal amount of love and respect, and have very healthy, really rich, awesome relationships with people that work for you.
Sure. No, I think that's actually really good advice. And the one thing that always kind of has blown me away with CEOs and people I've worked before in the past is like, sometimes they hire really smart people, but then they do everything possible to get in their way to not be successful. And it's like, but like, how do you balance between being that like visionary type that thinks they're right and has proven through a track record that they've been right a bunch of times, but also allow those brilliant, smart people that you did hire, like, get out of their way as well, so they can be successful and ultimately help the whole company and make you successful?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Leaders who work on themselves don't ever have this problem.
Interesting.
And when I say work on themselves, I mean, find a great therapist, find a spiritual teacher, take that inward journey. It could be through meditation, could be a range of things, where you understand deeply your own psychology and thereby understand the human psyche at large, and you develop your, some people use the phrase spiritual intelligence, or you just you get closer to what your heart wants, and you're able to communicate more wholly and completely, and not let your ego be in the driver's seat all the time. When we all have egos, and they're very important parts of us. There's great evolutionary benefits to our egos. We all, over the ages, all animals, need to first feed ourselves and then our kids,
Right,
so that society actually functions. So egos are really, really important. But the problem is, for a lot of people, especially people who start businesses and companies who want to be leaders, these are people who actually expand their egos and build big, strong, massive egos to cover for some internal insecurities, which is totally fine, comes from their nature or their nurture. The problem is that they don't know the difference between them and their egos. They don't know that they are more than their egos. They let their ego be in the driver's seat. When you think of some situation where you're pissed off, your nervous system is triggered. Different people get triggered by different things, but a common one might be you're in a car and someone cuts you off, or someone skips the line, someone is nasty to you and is aggressive or bad language out of nowhere, or a lot of times, like, say in the workplace, someone shouts down your idea or is disrespectful. That little jolt of anger, that's the response of your ego, and that is the body feeling their ego identity being challenged. And the thing that response, that shooting feeling that goes up your body, the thing you do after that, So that's, road rage happens, or like people say stuff in meetings that they really shouldn't. That's letting their ego do the driving. Their ego's in the driver's seat. And unfortunately, what happens with all of us is it's not just in those moments. We can be triggered over a long period of time. And anytime we have to just interact in these moments, we actually let our egos make the decisions. We just don't know the difference. But when you've done the work on yourself, so many different ways to do it: meditation, spiritual practice, spiritual guides and teachers and therapists, so many different ways these days. You catch it and you know the difference. And this is a really long way to answer your question.
No, I think it's good. It's really good.
Okay, good. Even the most brilliant, smartest, most capable leaders and CEOs and whatnot, if they've done this work, they don't need the tactics for, how do you make time to let someone else shine? They're the type of people that people want to be around and are fun and awesome to work with, and it's just good vibes and good energy. I mean, the difference with those people. So I'm a big advocate for leaders just doing that work on themselves. Put down the business books and the tips and the tricks, and step away from the blog posts and the shortcuts to product strategy success, and actually do the hard but so richly rewarding work of getting to know yourself.
I think that is some of the best advice to give anybody, because, and we talked about this a bit before we started recording, it's like, I'm so tired of the 10 lists to be successful, and you need to do this, or this person does this every day. And it's just sure, some of those things might work for you. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, basically everything you've said that you've done as a leader to build $1 billion company, you mentioned nothing about trying to change other people and just working on and understanding yourself. Right.
And the cool thing is, I learned this over time. The really cool thing is that if you do the private, quiet, solitary work to get to know yourself, and just grow as a person and become more kind and open and loving and aware, etc., that has a massive influence on the people around you.
Sure.
Yeah, massive influence. It's just really hard to feel comfortable with your ego in the driver's seat when you are working with someone who is that former type of individual. You feel shitty, you feel bad. Someone who's just takes a wiser, more skillful approach to work in life. They motivate the people around them to do the same. So it's a really cool and gentle way to just level everyone up, as it were. It's just more fun and it feels better. And then you come out of these business situations with, lifelong friends and cool relationships, and you get to work with each other in different ways and follow your life stories and stuff. And it takes the kind of transaction out of it all. So yeah, but I had to learn that myself, and that's definitely not the model I had going into business.
Interesting. So you recently transitioned to chairman. Walk us through that transition and what made you decide to move into that role.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to it really. I always dreamed of, I always imagined that chairman would be the place I would end up. I had been thinking about that for maybe the last 5 years. Didn't have a precise timeline on it. About 3 years ago, I hired a COO, a person named Karen Peacock. And part of my conversation with her at the start was like, hey, someday I'd like to be chairperson. In a dream situation, you would become CEO. Let's see how it goes.
Okay.
But I kind of want to put that in your head. I mean,
that's awesome.
Let me say that. And over the years of working together, we would talk about that, and we kind of knew it was something that we both wanted.
Okay.
And then kind of for me, start of this year, I was starting my 10th year working on Intercom. We just had this really successful pivot up market, and we started to see this tremendous growth. We had line of sight to profitability. I mean, the stars just aligned, and I just realized, like, hey, the company's ready to hand over, and I'm ready for a change. And that was about it. So that happened this year, and Karen became CEO, and I became chairperson on the 1st of July.
Very cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious though. You've talked about, if people haven't really picked up on it yet, I feel like you're one of the few companies that have actually taken kind of a different approach and being a little bit of a rebel around some of this stuff, and not actually just like sometimes like going with the grain, but also being not like very comfortable going against the grain and what people are doing. How do you keep that up, and what advice do you give to people that should be doing that or are too scared to be doing that?
Yeah. So there's a lot kind of behind this. The first is that I know there are no rules in business or creativity or life. Like there actually isn't a playbook. People ask, on fixed or specific endeavors, they're trying to raise money or whatever it is. Oh, how do you raise money? How do you do this or that? What's the right stage to raise this amount? Or should we add someone to the board at this stage? The answer I will always give is there's no rules. You can do whatever you want. There may be some norms,
Sure,
some standard ways of working in the market, but there's no rules. So that's the first thing that actually people just need to shake out of themselves. And unfortunately, 80% of people kind of enter this game and so many games just thinking that there's just rules that they need to play by. There's not. And then the unfortunate thing for those who just get stuck in those grooves is that actually the very best things happen to the people who break outside the mold.
Yep.
In fact, playing by the rules just makes you look like everybody else. You're in the same market, selling in the same way, same branding, same product, same type of talent, same way of thinking, same approach, attitude, same everything. And actually, progress in the world is identified by things that are new. And if you think about technology, what is technology? New technology, growth in new technology is defined by things that haven't existed before. The most valuable of these businesses have invented something that the world apparently needed but didn't yet have. By definition, that is new, that is different. And so by following the rules and trying to fit in, and I get it, people do want to fit in, they want to be accepted, they're modeling themselves after some certain business leaders or whatever it is. We all have our influences just as much as I did, and we've spoken about that.
Sure.
But the unfortunate thing is that that will lead to failure. And so, I actually think you don't have a choice, but I'm a big advocate for questioning far more of the things that people typically tend to question. And again, there's different people for different stages of the business and different functions. But when you are getting started, in my personal opinion, please stay away from the playbooks and the tips and the tricks and everything else, and find your own path. And in my opinion, also, it's just more fun. Being
Totally.
authentic to you and playing your own game. It's. I want to say it's almost like cheating, but it's not cheating. It's the path of really respecting the one life that you've got. I mean, it depends on your own philosophy or religion or however you think about life. But if you think that life is sacred, if you think that your life is sacred, if you're grateful for life, please do not try and live someone else's. Please cherish it by finding your own path. It feels great. It feels really good to do your thing. And so always from the very start, so much of our values was about doing things different, finding our own way, having respect for what came before, but knowing that we can do something, in an alternative fashion and do it better. It works different for different people, but that gave me a lot of energy and it gave us a lot of success. It's also easier said than done. It's just easier to follow the path well taken. But your real happiness in life when you really settle into who you are and you really do believe that you found a purpose and a mission, you'll always find it's quite unique to you. You know, I really think that true happiness comes from, you know, being true and authentic to yourself, and you'll always find that that's actually quite a bit unique. I saw someone say, I think it was Naval. Do you know Naval on Twitter? Naval Ravikant.
Yeah.
But he said, I think he said something like, if you find that your opinions of you and your friends, or if you find that your opinions neatly line up with the opinions of your friends, they're not your opinions.
Interesting.
I just thought that was just great wisdom.
Totally.
So again, I encourage people to get out there, be crazy, be them, have fun inventing, and just know that that is the only path to really great success. It's so trite, but for some reason, the most valuable wisdom is the most trite. It's the stuff under our nose, but we just choose to ignore it day in, day out.
No, man, I think that's really good advice. But sadly, we're out of time. So how about we close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and Intercom? And any other links you want to mention?
Yeah. Sure. Well, Intercom is at intercom.com.
Sure, most of us have used it.
Yeah, and you know, even if you haven't, you can check it out again. We launched a whole bunch of new customer support features. We never really aggressively invested in customer support before, but now we have all these help desk features, and you can choose us as an alternative to some of the great products like Zendesk and HelpScout now. So if you're thinking that maybe you could do better in customer support, check out some of our new stuff launched only weeks ago, intercom.com. And I'm Eoghan on Twitter, conveniently spelled exactly how, if you're not from Ireland, you would not expect, EOGHAN.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.